Hi, Kumbaya Corner. My voice is almost back. Almost. We are getting there. Yeah, we're getting there. So thank God for that. And I'm happy to announce that this is a solo episode. I don't know which one you guys prefer between the solo episode and then the episode with guests, but you'll be getting a good amount of them, honestly, because the conversation I have with my friends and potentially people that I would want to have conversations with as well, like authors, maybe movie directors, and just, public figures eventually. But starting from the conversation I have with my friends, sometimes I just feel like you guys actually need to hear this. It's just that good. Too many gems. But yeah, how is everyone doing? How was February for you? Let me know in the comments. Yeah, so there is actually a comment section for this podcast, you guys. I feel like I never promote my account, and I'm trying to do better. I'm really, really trying to do better. So comment section exists in the Spotify and I think maybe the Apple podcast. I don't know. I don't use Apple Music, so I don't know. Yeah. So comment, share, follow, and rate it as well. Yeah, thanks. What is today's episode about? Let me actually give you guys the thoughts that triggered today's episode. So, I don't typically like to comment on, current affairs and current happenings, but I feel compelled to do so because I got involved in the conversation, which I barely do. But then this time around, I got involved in the conversation. It was basically at the BAFTAs, the incident where the white guy with Tourette syndrome yelled a racial slur while Michael B. Jordan and Delroy Lindo were on stage giving a speech basically, and the guy basically yelled a racial slur. And then there's a lot of controversy on the internet right now. Some people are saying, oh, some people are obviously that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong, which it is. And then some people are like, he has Tourette syndrome, he can't control that. And then some people are like, oh, they are blaming the BAFTAs and BBC for not cutting that out the edits. There's a lot of mixed views on it. Jamie Foxx also shared his thoughts about it. He was like, he meant that shit or whatever. So yesterday I was scrolling on Instagram, and then so I watched the video where he said it, and I was so shocked. And everyone is like, he has Tourette's, which is fine. And then a blog released a post of him saying he thought we would understand. I guess that was just in the thing because I haven't gone the extra mile to listen to his apology or his explanation or anything, because personally I'm still stuck on the part where he yelled nigga, and I understand it is a disability and everything, but people were still harmed. Well, not harmed in the sense of harm, but people were wronged in this situation. Us focusing on the person that inflicted the harm and supporting him and saying it was a disability, it just makes me a little bit uncomfortable because I now reposted it on my story, and then I was like, why would we understand? Why would we understand? Basically, and then someone actually replied my story and she was like, oh, because he has absolutely no control over the ticks. So yes, and she goes, especially as Christians, you should understand. And I was like, usually my not immediate reaction would just be to end the conversation because I'm not one for an argument. But her kind of trying to weaponize me being a Christian as a reason why I should just understand. Mind you, she's a white lady. She's white. So quite frankly, this is low-key not your fight. You know what I mean? It is actually not your fight, but that's just by the way. You want to be an added voice, right? Fine. And then she basically says, oh, as a Christian I should understand. And then I'm like, oh, I said I don't believe he had no control over that. They weren't the first black people on stage, and regardless, I don't see any accountability being taken, ticks or not. And I said, as a Christian, I don't understand. And then she goes on and on to support her reason, and then she goes, he's not racist because blah blah. Mind you, I haven't said anything. I haven't actually said anything about racism. So the whole situation raised a question in my head and just made me really, really uncomfortable. I think I'm even still uncomfortable with the situation. But I'm even more uncomfortable with her being like, I should understand, especially as a Christian. No. No. And it's it just kind of begs a lot of things to question as well. But then there's just that I don't even know. I don't feel qualified enough, or not even not just qualified, but like equipped enough to talk about why it really makes me uncomfortable. Maybe one day I'll be able to dive into that, but my it just raised eyebrows in my head. It's like sometimes Christians raise alarms in my head, and I'm a Christian as well, but our behavior, especially because sometimes, and I say we because I want to say I'm not really exempt, and if I try to exempt myself by saying not all Christians, it does sound a bit hypocritical, but that is the reality of the situation, that it is not all, but then there's still a huge part of us that do. And unfortunately, if I identify as a Christian, I am not in a position to separate myself from other Christians and be like, oh, okay, no, I'm not like those guys, if you know what I mean. That is really, really not what Christianity preaches. Christianity actually preaches love and how God loves everybody. And I do love God as well. However, question mark, ellipses, I will not be expanding at this point in time. It just really begs that whole thing to question for me, because where are your values as a Christian? Now it's not just being a Christian, it's like you're also white, and this thing is something that you know how it is in the black community, and you just trying to paint this whole situation as like, oh yeah, well, as a Christian, it just really made me uncomfortable. But I guess maybe I need to talk with somebody and be able to verbally unpack this, and then I can get back to you guys. But that's just what has been on my head lately. And yeah, Christianity and I are just kind of on a we're not on a we're kind of on a slippery slope in a way that, like, I don't know how to explain. I feel like I'm not a practicing Christian. I feel like I'm not a practicing Christian. But I do love God. But then it's like, I guess my lifestyle, doesn't really portray someone that's like, oh, Christian. And I know that. And then I haven't really done anything to kind of change it as well. So it also makes me question myself as a Christian. Like, question mark, question mark, question mark. There's just a lot of question marks. And that's just where I am with, well, I'm just going to say religion, because at the end of the day, Christianity is religion, but in practice, it is a lifestyle. I don't really know how to like expand on that, but that's just what it is. And sometimes I reflect, like it's just like sometimes I just reflect on who God is, and to me, because I do feel like God is God. God is different things to different people, and it might be the same. There might be a quality of God that I feel like applies to me and someone else, but then I just feel like there's also a thing of how God is in you. The way God is in me might not be the same way how it's presenting in you, type thing. I'm really, really trying to express this, but it's so hard because it's also something that's so close to me, like so close to my heart. I want to be able to be vulnerable and then talk about this thing, and talking about it is also kind of some kind of clarity, and I feel like I'm going the extra mile, not just talking about it, but then sharing. Sigh. It's a lot. It just brings me back to one time in church. I was at a church service, and then I just saw myself praying fervently, ever so fervently. I grew up Pentecostal, by the way, so it's like is a thing. I don't know if you. I grew up Pentecostal in Nigeria. Just imagine how that is. African Pentecostal churches, the vibe is always different. There is a totally different vibe. But yeah, anyway, one of the sermon of the day was about your 11th hour miracle, and this was basically a Thanksgiving service, because it was the first Sunday in November. So every first Sunday of the month, there's like a Thanksgiving service. Fair enough. So for this service, it was about your 11th hour miracle, and I found myself praying seriously for my 11th hour miracle. Like, mind you, there was a whole sermon about it, but I feel like I was tuning in and out. I wasn't expressly paying attention, but I paid enough attention. I would zone out at moments, but basically it was about how your 11th hour miracle is basically like some last minute miracle, and gave an example of Hannah, where how long it took Hannah to have a child, and that was an example of an 11th hour miracle from the Bible, and how we should pray to God to just bring it to happen, and blah 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 blah. And we're praying and praying and praying because they kept on emphasizing pray, blah blah blah. It was like it was like 60% prayer and 40% of the sermon slash teaching. So in the moment, yeah, I was doing that, pray, 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 pray. That was fine. And then I got back home after the sermon, and then I started to think about the sermon, like 11th hour miracle. Like, what do I know I was praying about? I feel like I was just following instructions and not necessarily internalizing what was being said and then just seeing it work for me. I was just like following instructions and playing copycat, doing what everybody was doing around me. And this is how I feel about, and then it now makes me question. I feel like there was no room to ask questions about this and about why this is so, about why this is so. And I never had, like, it feels like there was no space to do this as a child growing up and growing up Christian. There was no room to like ask why this is important or why we should do this. I wasn't seeing the significance. I was just saying, oh, you should do it just because. So now that I'm growing up and I have this independence and I'm not with my, well, not necessarily with my family, I'm finding it hard to make the decision to actively go to church and participate at my own will without being like instructed to do so, because it was never really there to start with. So it's like now that I'm in a position where I can ask these questions, because I realize that I have agency to ask why, and I feel a need to also understand why some things are some way before I feel like I can follow it. I want to kind of know what I'm getting into type thing with Christianity. And then it's like, I don't think this question is really ever going to be unanswered, and that kind of makes me a little bit uncomfortable, which is kind of why I now have not an apathy per se, but now an indifference to acts of like doctrines and stuff of Christianity. I don't know if anything I said just makes sense, but I'm just saying it as it's coming to my brain. And that's why I say I love God. However, question mark, because if 2 plus 2 is 4 and 1 plus 1 is 2, what the fuck is this? And I also remember growing up when we would have like Sunday school. This specific time it was a preaching, and then we kind of got into talking about sexual immorality and why it's bad. And I was reading the Bible verse at the time, and then my mom proceeds to ask, and the Bible verse, I don't remember specifically where it was, but it was talking about how sexual immorality and homosexuality are basically evil and things of the flesh and is unacceptable and is a sin and whatever. And then my mom now asked me to explain what I read, like why is he a sin, blah 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 blah. And I said I don't know, like, because genuinely I don't know why he's a sin till this day. I don't actually know why. Like, I don't, and I can't think of an example in the Bible where there was somebody that was practicing that and then the person was punished or something happened to the person. There's really no place where, like, it just says, oh yeah, homosexuality is a sin or is a thing of the flesh. It's just something that you should not do. It never really explains why. So that was kind of another gray area for me that just made me, okay, so nobody just knows the answer to this. Like, are we just okay with not knowing the answer? So yeah, I told my mom that I don't know how to explain it. I don't know why it's a sin. And then she kept on asking me, and I said it's a sin because I guess the Bible says it's a sin. So that's another thing. And with Christianity, the word of God, which is the Bible, is basically God Himself. So in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word is God. So God is His Word, and His Word is Him. So it's like, okay, yeah, God has just said so, and then we should just agree. But then I don't know what it is in me that's kind of like, not good enough. I kind of need more. I feel like it's like, I don't really know. So this was another kind of gray area for me, and I'm just like, so nobody knows the answer to this. And I had this conversation with my friend where I was telling her I don't actually know why it's a sin. Like, so there are some things that I just want to understand. And then she now goes to ask me that, am I okay with not understanding? Like, if I never ever understand, what if I never understand? What if the answer is not there? Like, what am I going to do then? Am I going to still say, oh yeah, I'm a Christian and not practice it? Like, will I be okay with not finding out the answer? and trusting God anyway, and just moving on, like feign ignorance basically. Until this day, I've not been able to answer her question. So this is why with Christianity, I am just sitting on a big question mark. Like, and I know there's the whole journey to like disconstructing and everything, but it's like I also low key can't be asked to do that. The way I'm living my life, eating, praying, and loving, I'm actually fine with the way I am. Not trying to find the answer to anything, like just sitting on the fence. But the sitting on the fence is also frowned upon in Christianity. So that's what I'm saying. Indeed and in truth, if someone were to look at my actions, just sit down and watch me act, I don't think they would paint me as a Christian. However, if I did say, oh, what is my religion, I would say is love. I'm just such a let love lead, love is the last religion person. God is love. So this is my worship, this is my own idol. I don't want to call it an idol, but this is what leads me and my decisions and just me in life. So what does that make me? Like, guys, I'm really sitting on the fence here and I'm just sharing this with you guys, but that's really what Kumbaya Corner is about. It's honestly just a space for me to talk about the things that have no place in it yet, but I don't know if I'll ever figure it out. I don't know what the vibe is, honestly, but yeah. I'm just going to conclude this episode of Kumbaya Corner because I think I've gotten all my thoughts out on this subject. Thank you guys for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.